Leo rising. I didn't know you were Leo rising. I'm here on your site. I knew you were Sag.
Yes. I think that's one of the biggest things that kind of drew me to hip hop in the first place. With hip hop having a Leo sun.
Oh yeah, so it would naturally light up your yourself.
Yes, and not mmany people know this, but at one point I was actually trying to be like an aspiring rapper a long time ago.
Oh, great!
Yeah, it didn't pan out the way that I wanted it to.
Well,
but,
wait a minute, you kind of are a rapper though. I mean, you just rap the stars.
Right. This is true. That's very true. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Salt-N-Pepa, I think that they were just really groundbreaking in terms of what they were able to do within the genre of rap. I mean, female rappers in general, especially like around the early 80s, were, they really had to kind of put their foot into the door and kind of claim their own space in terms of what they were doing and in terms of like separating it from what the guys are doing, in terms of like hip hop being a very male dominated industry. And with Salt-N-Pepa, what I saw like in their composite chart was the fact that
hold on, for folks who are new whose astrological literacy has yet to fully express itself. What's a composite chart? How's that different than one of them's an Aries and one's a Scorpio, right? Isn't it one of them's or what was it? It was an Aries and a Scorpio, right?
Right. Aries and Scorpio.
So how's that different than what's a composite, and how can you use that to figure out what's up with two people?
Right. So a composite is when you blend the two charts, two separate people together, to get an idea of what the relationship is like between the two. So I don't know if it was Stephen Forrest who might have said this phrase, but I remember they were saying that like when it came to synastry, so synastry is the study of relationships, right, between people, and it was saying that you have the chart of one person, you have the chart of the second person, and then the third person, quote unquote, in the relationship is the relationship. So that composite chart would figure out exactly like why these two people came together, what kind of gifts that they're bringing to the table, as well as any challenges that they might face within that partnership as well.
Got it. So with Salt-N-Pepa now, Salt is, which one's the Aries and which one's the Scorpio?
So Salt is the Aries and Pepa is the Scorpio,
okay.
which is interesting because you have two Mars-ruled women doing this thing, which I thought was really interesting because they had this ability to combine the masculine, that Martian sort of energy, with the feminine as well, that Venus energy. Talking about their composite chart, they both have or rather the composite is a Taurus rising or Taurus ascendant. So having Venus up there really gave them that feminine allure. When I think about it, when you think about other female rap acts like Queen Latifah or MC Lyte, they were doing it for women, but there was a certain kind of masculine edge to them, which I think kind of like they had to bring to the table in order for people to kind of take them seriously. Because even today, a lot of times female rappers kind of get like waved off in terms of being able to stand toe to toe with their male counterparts. And I think that Salt-N-Pepa, I mean, their career has been spanned over like 25 years, and for them to be able to do that, I think it was really a combination of them being able to balance that kind of straight edge with that feminine allure as well.
Would the Taurus rising explain those fancy jackets they've got on in the
yes.
push it in the commercial 30 years later?
I know. When I saw that guy come a commercial, like I was like I was bowled over. I thought that was the coolest thing. But yes, the big gold chains, the big we used to call them 8-ball jackets.
Those had to be pretty pricey.
Yeah, people used to get robbed for those.
Yeah.
Actually, we talk about the New York streets, like. Yeah, those were top dollar.
So the rising, the appearance is that of something not expensive, but something well earthed. the Taurus rising. What's the so you said that one of them is an Aries, one of them is a Scorpio. What's the joint sign of the two? The joint sun sign.
So the joint sun sign is Capricorn, which is also interesting because Capricorn is a sign that is tied in with longevity, hard work, sort of like a rags to riches kind of story. And if I remember correctly, hip hop, the birth chart of hip hop has a Capricorn moon.
Yeah, and a Capricorn North Node.
Right. So that definitely speaks to a lot of what we hear in terms of like rappers talking about like how much money they've made, how much they have, you know. So that kind of speaks to that as well in terms of that relationship, you know, Salt-N-Pepa's relationship to hip hop as well.
So it's almost like the composite of the two of them, the Capricorn sign, kind of lit up and it had a certain natural synergy with the chart of hip hop itself. It sounds like. Right.
And you know, I was looking at you know, like their synastry contacts. You know, their individual charts are talking to each other, and you know, Saturn is the ruling planet of Capricorn. And I found that there were a lot of heavy Saturn contacts between the two of them, which was really interesting in terms of them being able to kind of come together and actually pretty much build a brand, you know, in terms of what they did that was very Saturnian or very, very Capricornian as well.
So when you look at the charts of two people, whether it's in business or love or a creative endeavor, can you tell if this is built to last? Or, I mean, can you distinguish Salt-N-Pepa from JJ Fad, who are hyper talented, but they're not around anymore?
Right.
I'm not hating on JJ Fad. I play Supersonic on this show all the time. So.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But that's the only track that I know them for. So
yeah.
that says a lot, right? But yeah, I definitely would say that Saturn again plays a huge role in determining how long people will kind of stick together. It was funny because, like, when I was doing the research for the article on Salt-N-Pepa that I did for Hexagon, I found this quote that Peppa said that, you know, she thinks of Salt as being like her business, you know, her business husband.
Yeah.
Which made me chuckle because a while ago, you know, when I was working a 9 to 5, I also had a work husband too. I think anybody who like just kind of working and spending a lot of time with someone, they kind of, you know, at the job, they start to become like you know, your marriage partner.
Yeah, you get the phrase work wife or work husband.
Right. And what's funny about that was that he was a Capricorn as well. Yeah. So there's something to that Saturn being that glue or that sticking power between two people for them to realize that when things get rough, or maybe they're not necessarily seeing eye to eye, because I know from their relationship, you know, you have two Martian influenced women. They're definitely not going to see eye to eye all the time. And they actually said, I think Salt actually said that they kind of went through a lot and almost ended their relationship because of all the bumping of heads that they did. But they stayed together and they stood in it. And I think a lot of that had to do with that influence of Saturn, kind of like that through thick and through thin sort of love for each other.
So if you were looking at, just let's say you got two astrologers, they're not trying to be Salt-N-Pepa, but, you know, they're trying to maybe they're starting an astrology school, or they're signing a lease, a 3-year lease, which is a long-term lease these days. Could you tell before they sign that lease, hey, you know, you got a lot of Uranian contacts, but not a lot of Saturn contacts, or maybe they do have a lot of Saturn contacts. So would you be able to decipher that and see, like, hey, you know, you guys got some staying power, maybe not as much staying power as Salt-N-Pepa, because they're actually, I think, been at it for 30 years now, but I know we don't want to age them, but could you decipher that from looking at two people's charts, if they're built to last versus just kind of a flash in the pan?
Yeah, so you definitely want to have Saturn, you know, when it comes between a relationship or a partnership between two people, whether it's business or romantic, there should definitely be a strong Saturn contact, either between, you know, one person's Saturn and the other person's Sun, so Sun-Saturn contacts, or Saturn-Venus, or even Saturn moon or Saturn descendant, because those, the ascendant, moon, sun, those tend to be like the really major players when it comes to a birth chart, because that's just essentially how we define ourselves. So you definitely want to have strong Saturn contact going actually both ways between the two, which will help the two people to figure out, like, okay, we're kind of in this together. How can we work this out?
Do you recall by any chance what some of the Saturn contacts were between the two of them? I remember one of them's got Saturn in Aquarius, I think. The other's got Saturn in Pisces, I think, if I recall correctly.
Let's see. Yeah, so Pepa, she has her natal Saturn is in Aquarius, and her Saturn in Aquarius is actually making a very supportive contact to Salt-N-Moon in Gemini. And then Salt, she does have her Saturn in Pisces, and so that's making a supportive contact to Pepa's Scorpio Sun. And then I think they also had a Saturn-Venus contact between the two.
I thought I saw a Saturn. Was there a Saturn-Jupiter in there? I always like that for business stuff. Saturn-Jupiter is like, at least for myself, the only times I've accomplished anything significant, either myself or with somebody else, there was Saturn-Jupiter, some type of Saturn-Jupiter contact going on.
Yeah. Actually, Pepa's Saturn, so Salt has a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. So Pepa's natal Saturn actually is talking to both of them, yeah.
So the person, so for the newer folks out there, so the two of them have mutual Saturn contacts, but so the Saturn just goes both ways for the two of them. So the Saturn person, are they like the parent or the authority figure to the Moon person or the Venus person? Like, how does that work exactly?
Right. So Saturn plays the sort of authoritative role in astrology, because Capricorn energy is associated with like the patriarch, this sort of parental energy. So anytime someone is kind of playing Saturn in your life, they're bringing a sense of responsibility to you. They'll be the person that kind of sit you down and kind of give it to you straight if they feel that you're kind of, acting up or, kind of being irresponsible. So having, and then too, it's kind of difficult when that kind of Saturn contact goes just one way, because the other person who's experiencing that Saturn may feel that person is trying to, boss them around or, being too sort of hard on them. So that's why it's good to have those things, the Saturn contact going, that mutual connection. So that way both people feel like they're kind of being supportive or sort of, I would say nurturing, because Saturn's not necessarily a nurturing energy, but, keeping each other in line, I would say. Yeah,
it's like a stricter form of nurturing. But if you're in business, that can actually be a good, if it's a business relationship like what they've got, that can actually be good, because you're going to have to buckle down. The two of them probably had to buckle down a lot, because they had to not only produce all that music, but, in an environment that was very hostile to who they were.
Right. And then you're also thinking about, like, the music industry in the 80s, which I'm sure was incredibly indulgent, across the board. And being able to, you think of, like, tons of musicians who are really talented and have done really prolific work, but it takes them forever to put an album out. Or, you hear those kind of, like, behind-the-music stories where it's like, oh, it took forever, they would such a nightmare to work with, because of all these kinds of things that were going on. And so for them to be able to kind of like actually stay focused and stay on track and actually make it through all of that, I think that was pretty, that was pretty major feat on both their behalf.
Are there any, can you give us any, I don't want to say like inside info, but anything you might have divined from looking at their charts? Like I was looking at charts of a couple celebrities, and I was like, yeah, I bet this one person is the one who had to tell the other one to be quiet in the business meeting because they're going to like flip a table or something,
Right.
So I was like, maybe this other person needs to be the one to be the authority figure in the business meeting, because, it's going to get out of control if the other person it was like a Saturn Mercury contact or something between whoever these two people were, and I think it was like a Mercury and Aries. I think that person's just going to shoot their mouth off. So maybe let the other. It was like a Saturn and Capricorn square Mercury and Aries, something like that. So I was like, well, let the Saturn and Capricorn person do the talking. You know.
Right. What I remember, between looking at the charts and just what I remember, I know that Pepa, the Scorpio, I think she has her Mercury is in Sag, or she has like this really outspoken Mercury. I can't remember exactly where it's placed, but I know that for Salt, who's a little bit more of like the laid back one in terms of like, because I think her Mercury might have been in Pisces. She felt that she was always having to kind of reel Pepa in, because Pepa was just always like the more high strung, more like bolder one, or rather, for lack of a better term, like the loudmouth between the two of them. So yes, I think it might have been Salt was probably the one that was kind of like, and then that Piscean energy of trying to like make sure everything is nice, and, everything's okay, and so I think definitely it was probably Salt. It was probably the one who was just kind of like keeping things temperate.
Yeah, no, we don't want to leave out their DJ, Spinderella.
Oh, Cinderella, right.
No, we didn't. That wasn't in the article, but we can still give her. We'll give. She's a Leo, so we got to give her some time. I actually use her as the Leo example a lot of times, because if you notice in the original Push It video, she's elevated. You got
right.
Salt-N-Pepa are singing and dancing, but who's the person who's a little higher up than everybody else? It's the Leo in the trio. Even though I think she's their employee actually, but she's the Leo, so she's up there elevated. Right.
Well, another thing interesting too, just the fact that speaking to like the Leo part, is that I know for many musicians, especially like when it comes to like the early days of hip hop, like you couldn't have anything if you didn't have music. So like DJs, for a very long time were very revered, in terms of hip hop music, because of the things that they were able to do with the record, the mixing and the scratching and just all that kind of stuff that they were able to do. And so for her to be a Leo in, this leonine music genre, I think it's just, like that you can get more like astrologically aligned than that.
Yeah, and I think she's got a Sag moon, so very hyper adventurous combination there.
Yes.
Kind of like the Lawrence of Arabia of hip hop.
Right. Well, I mean, going back to the composite chart, they all had they have a composite Venus in Sag. So I think that kind of spoke to like that kind of brainy / gaudiness, of the group, and being able to talk about like serious subjects like, HIV/AIDS, and sex, being responsible with sex, but also at the same time, like, let's have a party.
Yeah, they were great. I can't really think of any other group that's done everything. I mean, maybe it could be me being a Cancer, and I was born late 70s, so I grew up seeing Salt-N-Pepa. But right. I really honestly don't feel that there's been another group that's even come close to doing what they've done, both musically and culturally.
Right. Yeah, I can tell you, like, I haven't. No one really crosses my mind either in terms of like what they were doing that was able to speak well. I mean, across the board, I think hip hop has always been a voice for the voiceless, for people who didn't have a platform in the world and were able to kind of come and speak about things that were going on that, larger people would rather have ignored. But, in terms of women in hip hop, I think definitely, or just across the board, Salt-N-Pepa, they're, like I said, they were able to build a brand, and not a lot of hip hop artists have been able to do such a thing, because it's usually like, I don't know how familiar you are with the music industry in general, but there's so many stories about our artists who get signed and then they get jerked around. Excuse me, they get jerked around in terms of like their recording contract, they end up owing money or going bankrupt, all these kinds of horror stories that you heard about people being in the industry, and I think for them again to be able to last through all of that is huge.
Yeah, I remember seeing a thing on TV. They had Q-Tip. He broke down how the music industry works, and he's like, "You think I'm a millionaire because you see me on TV, and I got all these records and everything." And he broke down like, "Well, let's say you sell 1 million records, you think you're set, or you think that artist is set." And he broke it down. He's like, after 1 million records, he walked away with, I don't remember what the amount was, but it was, you would have almost made more working at McDonald's,
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of an extreme case, but like their music industry is littered with those sorts of stories. And I don't know what their personal situations are, but they're still performing. And I saw something on YouTube, and it looked like they were in Decatur, Illinois. This is just like a year ago. And right around the time when that commercial came out, because that was what prompted me. I was like, wow, the Salt-N-Pepa is still performing, and they look like they're still selling to sold out crowds. So they're still churning along.
Yeah, and just the other, what was it? Maybe about 2 months ago. I think it was around Christmas of last year. Oh, it's so odd to say last year, like this is January. They had a cooking show. It was like Cooking with Salt-N-Pepa. That was on, I think it was the Food Network, which I thought was like, that's really cool that they're still being able to remain relevant, And
they're Taurus rising, so it's going to be a very well catered cooking show.
Right, right.
Taurus rising with a Capricorn sun, so there's going to be some first rate food there.
Good eat, good eating.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now with that Aries, I think you said they have an Aries moon in the 12th in the composite.
Yeah.
So maybe behind the scenes, are things a little more feisty? Yeah,
that's the kind of the sense of what I got in terms of like their relationship, just in terms of like what Salt was kind of alluding to in terms of like them almost ending their friendship, after all these years of working together, and what really kind of jumped to me, because like I don't really remember them ever having like a public sort of feud, which is interesting because you have like bands or artists who they work in groups and they break up and things become very public and very ugly. New Edition kind of comes to mind, in terms of like Bobby Brown and stuff. Just thinking about that, but I don't really remember them kind of like going at it, at each other's throats in this kind of public thing. So that 12th house, that secret, behind the scenes, kind of speaks to them kind of like possibly fighting behind the scenes. But then, Saturn kind of coming in and making sure that they're able to keep it together enough so that they can give a very professional image. Yeah, so they kept it out of they kept any conflict off the media. Right, out of the media. Right. That would be a little more difficult today with the way the media is these days with the internet. But yeah, I don't remember that either. Any high profile, I don't remember them ever duking it out. At least if they did, I never saw it on MTV or whatever I was watching when I was a kid. Right, exactly. Yeah, I was trying to go through my memory to figure out if there was anything, and I really don't. I think they've always both said, even like their time. What it seemed that maybe they were kind of, because I know that Salt at one time, like she wanted to leave to go pursue gospel music, and I think during that time that was probably when they weren't as close. But even then, I don't think she, like the interviews and things that they gave, they never really said anything derogatory about each other. Yeah. Great. So like we were saying before, so if somebody, let's say you've got it can be musicians, yoga instructors, whoever. If they want to know if they're going to be the next Salt-N-Pepa, can they come talk to you? Maybe you could help divine that. Yes, definitely come see me at mylifecreated.com. Got it. Check it out. You want to make sure you got some Saturn contacts. Have Mecca check your charts. You don't want to sign that 3-year lease. You got some nice supportive Saturn contacts. You got some Uranian or Neptune contacts with the person. Maybe you want to think twice before signing that lease. Yes. All right. So mylifecreated.com, Mecca Woods, and latest issue of Hexagon. She's got the
article in there. So, Mecca, thank you so much for being on. I know you have a dentist, but if you're Leo rising, I'm Leo rising. And I guess we both have Pluto going through our 6th house, so we got to buckle down when it comes to all the healthcare. And you got me thinking, I was like, I need to get to the dentist too.
Yes. And that's the first thing, like during Capricorn season, I started making all my appointments. Like, all right, it's time to catch up.